All right, well, good morning, everybody. My name is Laura Boyce, and I'm excited to welcome you to our PA Needs Teachers virtual supporter briefing this morning. I would love to introduce my co-host for the morning and co-author of the report, Amy Morton. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Amy.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're thrilled with your participation in this effort, both previously and today and moving forward. And I come from the National Center on Education and the Economy and am a lifelong Pennsylvania educator.
Wonderful. And I'm from Teach Plus Pennsylvania, the executive director of Teach Plus Pennsylvania, a former high school English and history teacher from Philadelphia, have also been an elementary and middle school principal. And we are excited to spend today's hour talking to you about the PA Needs Teachers report, in particular, some of our policy principles and policy strategies that we hope to advance in the coming next 3 to 4 months, as well as to talk about ways that you can get involved. Just a little bit of background before we jump into that. The PA Needs Teachers report was generated after a summit was held in September 2022, where 150 policymakers, higher education leaders, K-12 practitioners, and nonprofit leaders gathered in Harrisburg to discuss the issue of teacher shortages in Pennsylvania. We know many of you were there with us on that date or who have been engaged with us in subsequent gatherings. We've also had a virtual educator roundtable that happened after the report and have been having conversations with many of you over the last several months. I'm dropping the link to the report into the chat. You also might be wondering, will you get a copy of these slides or a copy of the recording? The answer is yes. We'll be sharing all of that out after today's session, both for your own perusal, as well as if you'd like to share them with others and continue to help us spread the word. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Amy to get us started.
All right. Thank you, Laura. The first question that we set out to answer was, what is the scope of teacher shortages in Pennsylvania? And we are not going to review every data point that we highlighted during the summit, but we did want to touch on a few of the most striking. The first graph you'll see shows how the number of instructional teaching certificates issued in Pennsylvania has plummeted by over 2/3 in just a decade, from over 21,000 to under 7,000. The second data point, the red line, shows the number of newly certified teachers per year compared to the number of emergency permits issued to the teachers to fill an open position in a field they aren't fully qualified to teach. So in 2021, the number of emergency permits actually outnumbered newly certified teachers for the first time, which for us is a huge warning sign that our supply of teachers in PA is far short of demand. Here's a couple of quotes from some of our summit speakers and what they had to say about teacher shortages. And it appears to us that most of you are on in your computers rather than your phone. So I'm not going to bother to read those, so I'll let you read them. And then I'll hand it over to Laura by saying, first of all, thank you to all of the people who participated as panelists, speakers, and contributors at the table discussions during that summit, because it generated a tremendous amount of substantial information for us to develop the report.
Absolutely. So what has caused this shortage of teachers, which again, as we explain in the report, predates the pandemic by years or even decades, although it's certainly been exacerbated by the pandemic. In the summit, as well as in the report, we really hone in on 4 root causes. We're not going to go into these in the same amount of detail that we go into them in the report. So we certainly recommend, if you were not at the summit or if you haven't read the report in full, to spend some time really digging into that section on root causes. We talk not only about data at the national, international, and Pennsylvania specific level, but also highlight some case studies of promising practices that we can look to for counter examples and ways forward as a professional state. But the first root cause we explore is financial considerations. Specifically, the financial value proposition for becoming a teacher in Pennsylvania continues to worsen as the cost of college and other expenses to enter the profession, like certification costs, unpaid student teaching, et cetera, continue to go up, and the compensation for teachers remains stagnant and low relative to other professions requiring a bachelor's degree and comparable levels of education. The second root cause we explore is recruitment challenges. Specifically, interest in teaching and the status of the profession continue to decline, both nationally and in Pennsylvania. And we see this particularly among younger generations like Gen Z. And so we are really struggling to recruit more people into the profession over time as more and more young people tell us that this is not a profession they're interested in. And more educators and parents also say this isn't a profession I would like my child to, or my former student to go into. Third, inconsistent preparation and induction. Many new teachers in Pennsylvania do not receive preparation and induction experiences that build their subject matter expertise, give them sufficient on-the-job clinical experience, and provide support from highly effective mentor teachers. We know that these experiences are very variable across the state, and there are programs that are doing an excellent job with all of these pieces, but we have a large number, over 100 educator preparation programs in Pennsylvania, and we don't see the same level of quality across the board, as well as many of our emergency certified teachers are not even receiving any kind of formal preparation. And we know that the research tells us that those teachers who do not receive high quality preparation and induction experiences are less likely to succeed and persist in the field. Finally, the last root cause we explore is unattractive working conditions. Many Pennsylvania teachers experience stressful and isolating working conditions without opportunities for career progression or input into school-wide decision-making. We see a career that's really very different from the way the profession looks in some of the highest performing jurisdictions around the world, where the profession is, very prestigious. There's lots of time for planning and collaboration. There are opportunities for advancement based on your own competence, as well as your ability to develop the capacity of others. And so these are all challenges that we see as needing to be addressed by any policy principles or strategies. We wanted to highlight one particularly compelling speaker from our summit, who is a first-year teacher from the Susquehanna Township School District. And one of the things that she shared was this quote. She said, "One of my kids asked me, 'Why did you choose to be a teacher one day?' And another kid shouted from the side of the room, 'Being a teacher sucks.' And I was like, whoa, it's not that bad." But he said, "Well, my dad said it does. And I see on TikTok and I see online, all these people don't like teaching. And I'm on the same internet and they have a point. What they're seeing from their parents online and on the news, it doesn't look good. They're not inclined to go teach. They're not inclined to be in the place that they just struggled in, because we have 40 kids in my class." So again, this is just a reminder. It connects to several of the root causes of the challenges we're up against as we try to recruit many more highly qualified and diverse teachers into the next generation of teachers in Pennsylvania. I'll turn it back to Amy.
Thanks, Laura. Many of you who are on this webinar were at the session on September 22nd. So let me first say that we combed through all of the notes that were taken by our table facilitators to generate something that went beyond attempting to recapture the problem, because the purpose of our report is not simply to draw attention to or admire the problem. We're really interested, and I'm sure you are, in finding solutions to this crisis and making Pennsylvania a world leader in recruiting and retaining high quality and diverse teachers. So in looking at everything that happened during the summit and then trying to synthesize that into something that would allow us to create the types of statements that we felt would generate a shared interest across both the Commonwealth and both aisles of the General Assembly, we set out to express a few critical policy design principles. And these would apply not just to legislation, but also the policies that are being developed at the local level as well. So this is going to be a bit of a slog, so bear with me. I'm going to take each one of these 6 policy principles and just extrapolate a little further on each one. So number one, in order to make teaching more attractive as a career, the job of the teacher must fundamentally change. So we want people to be attracted to the profession, but in order for that to happen, we need to organize the work that goes on in schools and the manner in which teachers are treated to be more consistent with the characteristics of professional work environments, such as law firms and hospitals, which foster a couple of things that are not necessarily evident in all of our schools. And that is high levels of collaboration with time dedicated to that collaboration during the contractual workday that utilizes and exalts the professional's expertise of the teacher, and then provides competitive compensation, but advancement that's based on that demonstration of competence and the ability to develop the capacity of others, both students and peers. The second principle is that we don't want to solve teacher shortages by lowering the bar to become a teacher. Although eliminating the requirements to become a teacher may seem like an attractive and low-cost short-term solution to addressing the shortages, in the long term, this will actually make the profession less attractive to high-performing students and actually perpetuate the undesirable pay and working conditions that currently plague the profession. So while unnecessary barriers to entry that are not predictive of teacher quality or success, particularly those that lead to racial disparities, should be eliminated, we believe very strongly that rigor and quality must remain goals for Pennsylvania's educator preparation programs in schools. The third one is the idea that whatever policy solutions emerge that involve the investment of additional public funds that should improve both the quality and the quantity of the educator workforce, not just the quantity. So public funds should be used not only to subsidize the cost of recruiting and retaining more educators, but also to incentivize needed structural changes that will address systemic root causes to teacher shortages, which we anticipate would result in more qualified, better prepared, and a more diverse teaching force that's entering and staying in the system. Next line, policy solutions should in fact function as incentives rather than requirements so that we can reduce this compliance mentality that becomes a series of checkboxes as opposed to a commitment to a really deliberate and intentional approach to quality. So institutions that are in the business of preparing our educators, as well as the local education agencies that employ those educators, should be encouraged to make the necessary structural changes through the use of incentives, such as competitive grant funds, rather than forced to make changes through across-the-board mandates. We believe that this will reduce compliance mentality in favor of an opportunity mentality and encourage innovation among the willing, allowing for proof points that build buy-in across the system. Fifth, policy solutions should be systemic and address root causes. Policy solutions should address the root causes of the teacher shortages rather than the symptoms. And ideally, policy solutions should be designed to simultaneously impact multiple root cause problems, given the interconnectedness of our educational system. However, policy recommendations can be introduced separately, provided they contribute to and don't diminish a larger long-term systemic solution. In other words, we're willing to take things as we can get them, but we want what we get in terms of policy solutions to be part of a larger approach to the problem and not just a series of piecemeal components that make up the public school code. And then lastly, policy solutions need to drive not just excellence, but also equity. And while all communities in Pennsylvania are impacted by teacher shortages, we know that certain communities, particularly urban and rural communities, low wealth and low income communities, and communities of color suffer disproportionately. Ideal policy solutions will not only increase the supply of high quality and diverse teachers across the board, but also identify ways to accelerate the supply of such teachers to the highest need districts and schools. What we have found, by the way, is that these policy principles have been broadly embraced by the people we have met with who come from both the Republican and Democrat parties, as well as several of the advocacy groups that we've met with. Ultimately, as it says in the report, bold structural solutions will be necessary to address the root causes of educator staffing challenges. And we really do need to transform teaching into a desirable profession that attracts and retains highly qualified and diverse educators to shape not only our children's futures, but also our Commonwealth's future economy and workforce. And I believe we have the people on this call and across the Commonwealth who can do that. Laura's going to take these principles and share a little bit about how we have moved them into a strategy effort. Go ahead, Laura.
Thanks, Amy. So these policy principles, as Amy said, we hope will apply to any solutions that are introduced and passed in Pennsylvania at the local or the state level, whether they're legislative or administrative, relating to policy or practice. But we have started the process of getting a little more specific into policy strategies that we hope to turn into some legislation over the next several months. And we'll talk more about that strategy in a minute. So we've got 5 specific strategies. These are interconnected, and in particular, the first 2 really we see as going hand in hand as part of a comprehensive strategy. And these were really informed both by existing research, by national and international comparisons to see what's happening elsewhere that we can learn from, as well as recommendations from the experts and the participants in the summit. So thank you for all of you who were there and helped us to come to this clarity that we share here. The first strategy is to incentivize high quality teacher preparation, characterized by rigorous coursework and intentionally designed clinical experiences developed in partnership with local education agencies. So we really envision a system in which our Commonwealth is investing funds that incentivize, remember that policy principle of incentivization, close collaboration between educator prep programs and LEAs in a way that we can ensure that teachers are prepared to meet their LEA staffing needs and the needs of students to be successful in the classroom from day one. We talked at the summit about the idea of eliminating the concept of a first-year teacher by ensuring teachers were coming in so ready to succeed and to stay in the classroom. As we think about how we incentivize those behaviors, we're thinking about partnerships that would need to qualify by being able to demonstrate that their teacher candidates are diverse and represent the communities that they serve, that their candidates are prepared to teach high need subjects or in high need schools, that their teacher candidates are being supported to obtain their degrees free of cost in exchange for a commitment to teaching in that district or charter organization or LEA for at least 4 years, that they are being prepared with deep subject area and pedagogical content knowledge through rigorous and cohesive coursework that aligns with the LEA's curricular approach as well, and that they're having the opportunity to participate in at least a year-long clinical residency under the mentorship of an effective and trained mentor teacher with additional aligned mentoring during induction. So we see these requirements for this additional incentive funding as really having the potential to transform those educator preparation program experiences and to scale up and allow those programs that are already doing this to serve more students and prepare more teachers. We imagine preference could be given to high need districts, ed prep programs with a strong track record of success, and partnerships between ed prep programs and LEAs that have a really strong partnership with strong and clear working agreements of how they're going to work together to achieve these goals. This is also an opportunity to connect to other sources of funding, such as teacher apprenticeship programs, which are starting to become embraced as a model at the federal level and in other states. And so we could design this program in a way that partnerships needed to register as apprenticeships so that they could potentially unlock additional sources of sustainable funding. Second, we want to see investments in teacher retention through well-defined career ladders. So again, we're thinking of incentives to incentivize LEAs to develop innovative staffing models that incorporate teacher leadership development and career ladders into their existing approach to scheduling and staffing. This would probably require a more flexible approach to scheduling in order to have additional time for collaboration and that professionalization of teaching that we see in other countries. We talk in the report about some more details of how LEAs could qualify for that additional funding. which could be used for teacher leader compensation and training, as well as technical assistance and capacity building. That would involve things like creating a teacher leadership role or roles in districts, such as a lead teacher or a mentor teacher, clearly defining within a career ladder or leadership capacity development system what those roles look like, and allowing teacher leaders to take on additional responsibility as they demonstrate competence and an ability to lead the learning of their colleagues. As I mentioned, we really see this strategy as going hand in hand with the first strategy, so that we're developing this pipeline where teacher candidates are receiving excellent quality preparation and then entering into school settings where they're going to be retained because they're seeing the characteristics of a professional work environment that we know lead to higher satisfaction, higher effectiveness, and higher retention. Thirdly, we want to expand pathways into teaching for youth and paraprofessionals. We know that this is an area that many of you are interested. I've seen a few notes in the chat already about the need for more pathways for young people into teaching at an early level. There are many programs that are starting to be developed in Pennsylvania for high school students to explore teaching as a career pathway. Many of you were instrumental in advocating for a change to the Pennsylvania school code that is leading to the development of the first career and technical education pathway into K-12 teaching, which hopefully will be available for next year for high school students. We'd like to see these pathways continue to be expanded as well as funded so that LEAs all are able to offer these types of programs to their students. There is funding that can support dual enrollment opportunities, and everyone, regardless of where they live in the state, is aware of these opportunities and encouraging high school students to pursue them. We also see a lot of promise in the model of paraprofessional pathways into teaching, and would like to see these opportunities expanded as well, as has been happening in a number of areas around the state, most recently in the school district of Philadelphia. We want to improve the financial value proposition for becoming a teacher. As we mentioned in the root causes, right now the cost benefit equation does not balance out because it's expensive to become a teacher, and then the pay is relatively low. We need to work toward a goal of making it free to become a teacher in Pennsylvania through a variety of different avenues and funding sources, including the teacher apprenticeship model and service scholarship programs. We also want to eliminate other financial barriers, such as funding stipends for teacher candidates to do their student teaching or their residency, subsidizing the cost of certification exams, investing in loan forgiveness for teachers, and thinking particularly about how we can provide those incentives in high need subjects in schools. And yes, we do think that teacher pay is a part of this equation. Obviously, it's a tricky part in a local control state. But as we think about how we can incentivize that higher pay, we need both increased and equitable state funding of education in general, as well as the exploration of targeted financial incentives for teachers in high need subjects in schools. Finally, we have identified in the course of this report a number of areas where we don't actually have good data to help us to understand and identify and anticipate teacher shortages, to understand root causes of teacher satisfaction or dissatisfaction, and to really drive resources to where they're needed the most. And so we have a number of specific data points that we would like to start collecting data on, specifically demand for teachers as measured by vacancy numbers and rates, the ability to track teacher candidates longitudinally from their ed prep programs into the workforce, a statewide teacher working conditions survey and exit survey, as well as making dashboards of some of the existing data to make it more publicly accessible to the public, to programs, to LEAs, and to policymakers. So that was a lot, but we wanted to share that level of detail so that you can have a good understanding of where we are looking to go next, and how you might, feel about those recommendations. So just to build on that, what is next for the PA Needs Teachers campaign? We have been, up until this point, mostly in what we're calling phase 0. So this was the phase that started really in September with the summit and is going through this month, where our goal has primarily been to build awareness of the problem and potential solutions. We held the PA Needs Teachers Summit in September. which generated a lot of press that helped to increase public awareness and policymaker awareness of this issue. The report release that was officially released on February 1st is continuing to build that awareness. And we hope to continue to see a high level of interest from the press, from the public, and from policymakers as we have up to this point. We're really now launching into phase one. You'll see there's a little overlap between the phases, but phase one is about building our coalition, and we see you as a critical part of that coalition. We have been sharing the report with key stakeholders in draft form even before it was released February 1st, and now in its public form. Some of those key stakeholders have included the Shapiro administration, legislators on both sides of the aisle, including key leaders in the Senate Education Committee, anticipated leaders of the House Education Committee, leaders at PDE from both the previous administration and the incoming administration, as well as a number of statewide associations and advocacy groups that we hope will be partners in this work. We've been holding briefings with these different groups. We also are working towards some additional hearings. There's going to be a Senate Education Committee hearing at the end of this month, called by Senate Education Committee Chair Dave Argel, focused on teacher shortages. That was inspired by this report, and Amy and I will be sharing the findings of the report there. We're also holding a briefing for House legislators in about a week and a half, where we'll be sharing our findings with them as well. And we are really at the point where we're asking everyone that we can to join us in this effort. And so we'll talk in just a moment about how you can more formally sign on in support of this effort as well. And then where we're going next, phase two, is really about affecting policy change. We're building support, we're building a coalition. And our goal is to develop, introduce, advocate for, and pass aligned legislation and policies, including funding for those, policies and new programs in the state budget by June 30th, which, if you're not familiar with the state policy making calendar, that's the date by which the annual budget has to be submitted and approved, as well as the annual school code, which often includes key legislative priorities related to education. So we've got a very busy next several months ahead, but we are very optimistic about our prospects for being able to really enact meaningful change in this short-term period of time, while also working towards longer-term progress in partnership with Senator Ament's 2030 Commission on reimagining education, and thinking about long-term. We know this isn't going to be accomplished just in one legislative package or one cycle. But we see a potential to really get started soon. So I'll turn it back over to Amy to talk about how you can get involved.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was a lot, but you did a really nice job getting that clarified with your explanations. Okay, so there's several things that you can do. First of all, if you use the whatever that bit.ly thing is called, because I'm not sure exactly what that's called, the URL that will get you to, or the I also don't know what that thing is called. What's that called again? I'm sorry, Laura.
There's a QR code and a bit.ly link, and the bit.ly link just dropped into the chat.
I'm sorry, my technology terminologies just flew right out of my head if I ever knew it in the first place. We would invite you to fill out the short Google form that indicates that either as an individual or your organization or both want to be included in our biweekly coalition calls. We're going to begin those in March, and do basically every 2 weeks, we'll have a short conversation about where we are with the campaign, what kind of work is needed moving forward in terms of advocacy, and just keep everybody really well informed, as well as receive any input that you have to share about the processes moving forward. So please, if you're interested and willing, take the time and fill out that form so you can stay connected to the campaign. The other thing you can do is just follow PA Needs Teachers on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And we would love for you to do everything you can to put the information out there that we're sharing today, as well as we proceed, with some of the solutions that we hope to see come to reality, that we can continue that social media campaign to encourage people not just to get involved, but just to continually keep people aware of what the challenges are and how we're going about as a broad group of stakeholders attempting to solve them. And then lastly, on that third piece is share the report. So we're going to share these slides with you, and that share the report is a link, but I think Laura has already put that link in the chat as well. We really invite you to make the report as widely accessible as possible to your networks, including your colleagues, local school districts, schools of education, your local state representatives and senators. As Laura shared, we've been meeting with leadership from in the legislature. We've been meeting with leadership in the advocacy groups. And then we just ask that you continue to stay active in your social networks around this important topic. I'll hand it back to you, Laura.
All right, thank you, Amy. Well, I'm going to actually at this time stop sharing my screen because we've shared all of the information that we hope to share with you, and we do have time for some questions. I know that there have been a number of things coming through in the webinar chat, which I haven't been fully able to keep up with while we were presenting. So we'd love to have folks, if you have a question that you'd like to submit, use the Q&A function down at the bottom of your Zoom taskbar to submit questions that you'd like to have answered, even if you already sent them to us in the chat, if you don't mind reopening those, and we'll try to address some of those questions and also get you out a little bit early. I see a request for some links again. So yes, we can drop the link to the report.
And the slides, as Laura's doing that, know that we're going to modify the notes on the slides so they don't have our names on them, because we made notes and they'll be useful to you, but they won't be they won't be if you think somebody named Amy is going to show up when you're using them. So we'll get those squared away, and we'll send out as a follow-on to this webinar a copy of those slides so that you have them and can use them with the groups with whom you work.
Yes, so if you want to, request to share these slides with your school board at an upcoming school board meeting, or you want to bring them with you to meet with your local representative or senator to talk through those, we certainly encourage that. And our goal is for these to be open source and available to be shared.
Okay, so there's a question in there's a question in the question answer piece from Jeff around quantity versus quality and changing legislation. So one of the things that we feel really strongly about is if you look at the first two policy strategies that are in the report, I think they start on page 28. There's an inextricable link that we want to assure happens between higher ed institutions affected by policy strategy 1 and K-12 institutions affected by policy strategy 2. So the idea of increasing the quality is twofold. One is to recognize the highest performing teacher preparation programs in terms of how well they are doing and what they are doing, so that we can create a set of conditions that should probably exist for all 97 higher ed institutions in Pennsylvania that prepare teachers. Just as by way of an example, I was not aware of this until a couple of weeks ago when I was meeting with someone from Grove City College who actually engages K-12 educators from the local school district in interviewing the teaching faculty applying to work at Grove City in their teacher preparation program. That's a pretty novel idea. It shouldn't be, because the preparation programs are preparing teachers to work in those K-12 environments. So there should be a really tight partnership between higher ed and K-12, considering the significance of the work that is being done in both institutions. But the idea that we could articulate the conditions that should be in place in higher ed preparation programs, as well as the conditions that should be in place in K-12 environments that professionalize the role of teachers and therefore attract the highest quality candidates, as is done in the highest performing education jurisdictions around the world, is the idea that we don't want to simply continually sacrifice quality for quantity, but instead actually elevate the professional status of teachers in a way that attracts more people to the position who can be that much more effective in the classroom. I said in one of the comments, there's a lot of devil in the details, and it's going to be really critical that we can collect from all of you, which is why we want you to be part of this coalition, those kinds of examples of conditions that are in place in some of our higher ed institutions and K-12 environments where they're creating career ladders as opposed to salary schedules based solely on seniority, but career ladders based on competence as the basis for advancement. We want to look at what those things are in place. I know of many because I work with districts across the Commonwealth who are trying to do these things. But we want to collect them and create the means by which we can incentivize those same practices happening in both higher ed and K-12 that does both the increase in the quality as well as attract that many more people into the profession to increase the quantity.
Thanks, Amy. I'll take the next one from Richard Joseph. Hi, Dr. Joseph, one of my former mentors back in my days at West Philly High. He asked to talk about how a teacher prep program can be funded for a teacher apprenticeship. So just to share a little bit about the teacher apprenticeship model, this is really a fairly new model that was originally, you've probably heard of apprenticeships and you associate them primarily with things like carpentry and the skilled trades and so forth. This is, the workforce development world that has existed for a long time, really going back to the guilds, but in the United States has been a part of our approach to workforce development for a while, but has not traditionally been used in fields requiring bachelor's degrees such as education. Tennessee was the first state to successfully develop a model for registering their grow your own / teacher residency programs as a federally registered teacher apprenticeship, which means that they can potentially qualify for both federal and state workforce dollars. There's a number of different types of dollars, including WIOA and other apprenticeship funds. Essentially, there are specific requirements that a program has to meet to qualify as an apprenticeship. Many of the requirements are similar to things that you might see in a traditional teacher residency, but they have slightly different names. So you'll see that there needs to be related technical assistance, which is the classroom experience that is provided by an educator preparation program. There needs to be an ability for candidates to earn pay while they're going through their on-the-job training or student teaching, and for that to be increasing over time as they demonstrate more competence. There's a number of other things. And so in Pennsylvania, we're a state where we don't actually need to get registered by the federal Department of Labor. Instead, our state Department of Labor and Industry is responsible for recognizing programs as registered apprenticeships. And the State Department of Labor and Industry is in the process of developing a template and an application for programs to be registered as teacher apprenticeships, which is really exciting. There's precedence for this in the early childhood world. There are a number of registered early childhood education apprenticeships and 1 or 2 registered teacher apprenticeships in Pennsylvania, but it's a pretty untapped model. And so we're currently working in partnership with PDE and the Department of Labor and Industry to try and advance that work while making sure it aligns with this work and that those requirements are really aligned with what we know about the characteristics of high quality educator preparation. So the short answer to your question, Richard, is that there are gonna, I think, be a lot more resources and templates that educator preparation programs can use in the future in partnership with their partner LEAs. But right now, it's a little bit of uncharted territory in terms of going through the process to formally register your programs as apprenticeships. Related question, are higher education unions a barrier to grow your own programs or apprenticeships? Not that we've really identified. I think that there are certainly barriers just in terms of how things have been done in the past and how higher education is sometimes funded and sometimes the politics within institutions. But specifically unions is not a barrier that I'm familiar with. And I think that there are a lot of educator preparation programs who are really eager to engage in some of these new promising models, but it's a matter of support, it's a matter of alignment, it's a matter of funding oftentimes.
Hey, Laura, there was a question about whether or not we're working with Tanya Garcia, and I think there's a group that you serve on. Do you want to just share a little bit about that?
Sure. So many of you know, some of you are also on Pennsylvania, the PDE committee for educator talent recruitment. Sorry if I got the exact wording wrong, but this is a committee that was formed After the school code this past July was passed, it's a new committee required by law under Senate Bill 99, which was passed as part of the Act 55 school code. And that committee, in the immediate term, its main priority is developing this CTE program of study for K-12 teaching. But more broadly, it's tasked with implementing PDE's educator workforce strategy, which I'm sure many of you have seen and contributed to. And so Tomas Hanna was leading that work as the Chief Talent Officer at PDE. He recently left the administration during the transition and has not yet been replaced. And so in the meantime, Dr. Garcia is leading that, and myself and a few others, including potentially some folks on this call, are serving as kind of the kitchen cabinet out of that committee that's continuing to try and move those pieces forward. So yes, we are working closely with Tanya, trying to continue to make sure that this work is a priority within the department, while also obviously there's a lot of transition with Dr. Mumin's appointment, and he is working towards his confirmation. So I think we all have shared goals and a shared sense of urgency, and it's just a matter of continuing to keep moving things forward, recognizing that there's not just a need for legislative change. There also is potentially a need for administrative change for specific things that are within the power of PDE to do on their own, but that might require additional resources and funding to PDE. But yes, Dr. Garcia is a great partner of ours and was at the summit, has, I know, shared this report widely within PDE, and we're excited to continue to work with her.
Yeah, I think one of the statements that's in the chat, let me see if I can just find it here, is the idea of parsing out the difference between quality as defined as traditional preparation versus quality as defined as job ready, which defines the readiness to actually teach, which requires a lot of on-the-job training, in case you didn't see the statement. And I think that's where we really need your help. As two people working on this with a small team, we can't know all the really positive things that are going on out there between partnerships among higher ed and K-12. And I think the more both institutions understand each other, the greater likelihood there is that we can resolve issues and differences and address needs of students and teachers. So we really encourage you, and you can use, I'll put our email addresses in the chat, but you can use us as a place to, for the time being, until we have something more formal to collect these ideas, is to really share some of what you have found to be purposeful, practical, and evident of improved teacher preparation and improved relationships between higher ed and K-12. Please share those, because we want to create a set of conditions that people should aspire to in a way to incentivize change, as opposed to mandate something that may or may not be seen as beyond a compliance issue.
I've got a couple questions that I'm going to try and respond to, one that came through the chat and one in the Q&A. So the first question was, do we see these initiatives as sector specific or open to benefit all types of schools and students, parochial, private, public charter? Our hope is really that, this is a challenge that is facing the education sector as a whole across all different types of schools. And we are hoping to see this benefit all schools. I think we've been intentionally using the language of LEA because we do see this as primarily, public funds would primarily be going to support public schools, but that would be inclusive of both traditional public schools, or traditional district schools, charter schools, as well as, in some cases, intermediate units that are working with groups of schools in rural areas where the districts might be too small to be able to really take this on as individuals. But we do hope to partner with the charter associations and charter schools, as well as, intermediate units, individual districts, individual schools, and, some of the statewide associations representing public school administrators. A question from Robert about how the most recent court finding around underfunded schools might impact this. Well, Robert, that is a larger question about what's going to happen with that lawsuit that I think it's going to take some time and a lot of advocacy to really play out. The short answer is that the courts have not mandated a specific remedy, and it really is going to be up to Governor Shapiro and the legislature to determine how quickly they're going to act in response to the court's finding that our school funding system is unconstitutional. I'll say on behalf of Teach Plus, we hope that they're going to act quickly and decisively with some major investments, which if those investments are made in basic education funding and the Level Up program, which focuses on the most underfunded districts, that would certainly be helpful in giving LEAs more resources to address issues like teacher pay and have resources to invest in the educator pipeline. But we can't necessarily count on those, and we are certainly hoping for additional investments in the range of $100 to $300 million specifically into the teacher pipeline as part of our current advocacy. I'll stop there, and Amy, I'm sure you've gotten caught up on some more questions.
I was like waiting for you to take that one, because that one's kind of a challenge. But the other thing is, I think we have to really look carefully, and I say this with love in my heart, at how we spend the money we have, because in the short term, that funding issue is not going to be resolved. But we are still going to have a teacher shortage problem. So we just need to be very strategic about how we spend the money we have. And I'm not going to go into that further because of the time frame. I'd rather take a look at the question about student teaching. One simple thing that I noticed was happening in at least one higher ed institution is that student teachers started with the students at their pre-service days prior to the start of the school year. And that alone is significant to a first-year teacher's experience with classroom management, when they actually get to see how an experienced teacher establishes protocols and norms in their classrooms, as opposed to having student teachers start at the time that the higher ed institution semester begins. To the idea of being able to pay for that, I think we should really look at what happens with most paid college student internships, which is exactly that they are paid internships. And you see those being very successful, as opposed to student teaching, which really is much different than every other model of a paid internship during a college student's experience. And I would just mention too, this is the anonymous attendees question I'm responding to. What suggestions do you have for programs at liberal arts colleges? As the proud graduate of Dickinson College, a small liberal arts school where I graduated with my teaching certificate, I think there's a tremendous amount of benefit of having students, college students, whether they are liberal, small liberal arts colleges, whether they're state PASHE schools, or wherever someone goes, that they have a very deep content knowledge as part of the responsibility of preparing to be a teacher. And quite frankly, in the highest performing education systems around the world, higher ed has more of a responsibility around that deep content knowledge, and the K-12 institutions have more responsibility around pedagogy. So we might want to consider what that looks like in terms of the way we think about teacher preparation in this country, in our Commonwealth.
Right, I think we are making pretty good progress on the questions. We probably have time for one or two more. I'm also dropping back into the chat. Oh, I dropped it just to myself. So let me drop it to everyone.
Jeff has a great question. I got to tell you, Jeff, it says, do you have data on the number of potential teachers that are washed out by the required PDE testing? I don't know that we have numbers, but I will tell you that when I attempted to navigate the PDE testing site in order to make sure that I was accurate in whatever I reported in the report, that I was truly challenged as a person who holds advanced degrees to figure out how to navigate that process by going from the PDE site to the testing site, to then to figure out how much did it cost, when were the tests available, how to access. I think we could do a lot of work if there is going to be a continued commitment to something like testing, which I'm not sure that's the answer. I think we could do a better job with both supporting anybody's ability to manage that in terms of cost as well.
Right. Well, we always like to get people out a little bit on time or early, so that they can have a stretch break before their next meeting. It looks like we've had an opportunity to answer many of your questions. I've also dropped into the chat both the link to sign on in support of the campaign, as well as both Amy's and my email addresses. We would love to hear more from you. And again, over these next few weeks, we are really working to try to collect as many supporters, both individual and organizational, as possible, so that as we move into March and start to have some legislative language drafted and some interested legislative sponsors, we are ready to reach it back out to those who have signed up to say, here's exactly how you can continue to move this work forward. So if there are ways that we can support you in that, if your organization would like, either to have these slides to share out, or, a briefing, or if you have questions before your organization signs on, we'd love to answer those. We would love to just continue to think with you about how we can maximize the impact of this report, and even more so make this into concrete policy change. So we thank you for your time. We look forward to being back in touch with you soon. We will be sending out a follow-up email later on today with the recording, with the slides, and with all of the links that have been shared in the chat. And in the meantime, thank you for your time. We look forward to being in touch.
Thanks, everybody.